Hi, I'm Stuart Little, photographer, Photoshop educator and action specialist for littlephotoshop.com. In this video tutorial for Digital Photographer magazine, I'm going to show you how to do selective colour. Now, you probably had a go at this before, but we're going to look at doing it with a little bit of a twist. So to get started, I'm going to navigate down to the adjustment layer, and I'm going to use the vibrance adjustment layer. This will allow me to desaturate things, but just not go completely minus 100. I'm actually just going to go back to around about minus 90 possibly, just so there's a hint of colour going on, and then that allows me to then just play with the saturation, or rather the vibrance I should say, until I get a good tonal value in the actual image itself, looking good at around about minus 13. Unlucky for some, we'll just go for minus 15 just to round it off. So if we zoom in a bit, I'm going to show you how to do a selective colour technique. Now, you need to make sure you've got your black as foreground colour and your white as background colour for this technique, because we're going to be working into the layer mask that's built into the vibrance adjustment layer here. So if you haven't already done that, press D in your keyboard and then the X key to rotate it round. From there, we're going to be on the brush tool, so press B to go to the brush tool if it's not already there. And we're going to work at 100% opacity, 100% flow. Now, in terms of the actual image itself, we've got some new controls to work with it. We've got the option to control the opacity, and we've got the option of controlling the pressure within CS5. So if you're using an earlier version of Photoshop CS3 or CS4, you can get to this stuff via the brush options, the brushes panel effectively. But in CS5 we've got the option of overriding those settings and working them directly from the tool. If you're using a graphics tablet, of course. If you're using an actual mouse, then it's going to be a little bit trickier, but you'll get there in the end. So to zoom in, I'm doing Command or Control plus, and then to increase and decrease the size of my brush, I'm using the left bracket key, which is next to the P key in the keyboard, and the right bracket key, which is next to the Enter key, to increase the size of the brush. So left decrease, right increase. To navigate around, I'm using the spacebar, hand tool, and it's just a case of now starting to actually paint. So I'm applying the black colour to the mask, and this will create a hole in the adjustment layer, reintroducing the colour from below. Now the good thing is, when I get to the edge of this sort of hedge topiary, I can start to lift my graphics tablet up a little bit, and it paints in less colour. So I can gradually introduce more colour to the edge, and this cuts down the amount of edge contamination that you tend to get with this kind of technique. The one thing I will say is that this is more art than science, so don't worry too much if you go completely over. If it's obvious like this, press your X key, bring white to the foreground, and then start to reintroduce the adjustment layer. X again to bring black again back in, and then you can start to recolour the element that you want to selectively pop out. And that's what I tend to call this technique, popping colour. So I'm just going to work all the way down to the bottom and slide over to this side. I'm using different pressures on the pen at all times. You're just going to kind of got to feel your way through the image and then work up the other side. And just make sure you tidy up the middle areas. If you get it right, it should look like that. Now when you selectively colour an image, and I see this an awful lot in wedding photography, wedding photographers tend to navigate directly towards the bouquet and everything else becomes black and white. Now that's okay for one shot if the bouquet is on its own, but if the bride's actually in the actual image itself, holding the bouquet, then the most important element is the bride, not the bouquet. So just kind of keep that in mind, that whatever you want to selectively pop out, it's up to you. There's no hard and fast rules. but it is better to pop out more important elements. In this case, I want to draw you, the viewer's attention to this garden here, and to do that, I'm going to pop out all the colours in the garden. Whereas, if the river was more important to me, I could have popped out the river and left the garden and the hotel and the monument in the background all alone. So whatever you want to be the most important element in your image is the element you actually pop out. And you can see I'm just roughly doing this, but making a good job at the same time. If you want to reintroduce more colour, you can also lower the opacity of the vibrance layer. I think it's a little bit trickier up at the back end here, because we're going to start working on this bandstand if we're not careful. Just working our way down. Got a little bit over the edge here, so I'm just going to scrub that back and just gently apply some colour into the edge, and you can see where I'm going with this. Now I know for a fact in this monument up here, monument to Robert Burns, the very tip of it, albeit it's quite far in the distance, does have a hint of gold on it, which we can obviously reintroduce and make sparkle a little bit. And we zoom back out, and you can see that just quite subtly in the distance. So there we go. Selective colour on a black and white. We've gone a little bit different because we've used a vibrance adjustment layer. We've played with the vibrance just to alter the sort of tonal range, and also kept the opacity at -90, so there's just that hint of colour coming through. If you want a pure black and white, just drop it to -100. If you wanted to go for a stronger black and white effect, then you could go for the likes of a gradient map, or obviously the black and white filter, which would obviously make everything black and white, which is what we don't want, but you can sort of compare the two there. And there we have the selective colour. So always go for the selective colour where you want to draw the actual viewer into your image and what's most important to you.